This is episode 8 of the Latter-day Saint Geeks podcast. I'm Spencer, and in this episode, I'm joined by guest geek Patrick to discuss the new Digimon movie, Digimon Adventure 02: The Beginning. Welcome to the Latter-day Saint Geeks podcast. I'm Spencer, and today I'm joined with a friend from my stake, Patrick, and we're going to be talking about the new Digimon movie. So, Patrick, go ahead and say hello and introduce yourself a little bit.
Hey, everyone. I'm really excited to be on the podcast today. So my name is Patrick. I grew up in California and have kind of traveled around the United States my last 30 plus years of living. But what has been consistent throughout my life has been my just love of different types of animation and cartoons, and Digimon was one of them.
And this is the first time that we're actually recording. I'm actually recording with someone in the same room because Patrick's in my stake. I came over to his house, and we're got an early morning recording session going on right now. Before we get into Digimon or even our recommendations, we're excited here in our stake right now. By the time this episode's released, it'll be somewhat old news, but the previously announced Prosper Texas Temple, was recently renamed the McKinney Temple and is going to be built about 15 minutes from where I live currently, and that's probably about like half an hour from you guys.
Yeah, so it's about 30 minutes than we originally thought, but yeah, it's very exciting.
Yeah, Prosper was going to be really close to you guys, but you're basically in Prosper.
Yeah, we're almost in Prosper, which is crazy.
But still, half an hour is short compared to how long does it take to get to the Dallas Temple?
So about 35 minutes for us.
Okay.
So it's going to be at the equidistant, but that's totally fine. It's going to be more on the roads than on the highway. So we're excited.
But hey, when the temple's closed for cleaning like it was last month, it's you got options then.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's going to be definitely a little bit different of a kind of tone. It's going to be brand new compared to the Dallas Temple, which is actually pretty old in comparison. So we're really excited.
I didn't realize the Dallas Temple was considered old at this point.
I would say it's not the newest one.
I mean, I guess anything that was built before the 2000s is
it feels old,
old at this point. Look how many President Hinckley, President Monson, and President Nelson have announced, built, and dedicated.
Significant amounts.
Ever since anything before that 100 temple mark that President Hinckley did,
right,
is kind of maybe not old, but definitely the older part.
It feels dated. Yeah. Not in the sense of just like designer style. It's just one of those things where it's like, oh yeah. I mean, when I was growing up, we had, I think, 10, 20 temples, and now to say that we have
coming up on 200,
it's just insane to realize the growth of the temple building that we've done in the last 15 years. So
I mean, between President Hinckley doing the smaller temples and just the growth of the church, I don't think anyone's too surprised, but at the same time, it's a marvelous work and a wonder.
Absolutely.
So, well, before we get into Digimon, which we're going to be discussing the new Digimon movie, Digimon Adventure 02: The Beginning. But before we get into that, we're going to do our recommendations. In the past month or so, I've been starting to rewatch Lost. And I was telling Patrick before recording that I feel like I'm probably one of the only people who didn't hate the ending. But I wanted another show for while I'm doing chores or while I'm folding laundry, and just one of those shows that, like Digimon, I've seen enough times and has enough nostalgia that when I'm having a tough mental health day, it can give me that sense of nostalgia that kind of perks up the dopamine. So I'm not rushing through the show. I'm just kind of going through it slowly when I need like a show for 10, 15 minutes at a time, even sometimes. But hey, it's doing its job. It's prompting the dopamine, so I'll take it. All right, Patrick, what's your recommendation for people?
So this one may not be animation based, but The Last Samurai, starring Tom Cruise and quite a few of significant Asian based actors. I just rewatched it with a friend who had seen it for the first time, and I was it was just incredibly well done. I think there were some funky accents, and then obviously there's the one thing about Tom Cruise being like the only samurai not to die, which makes no sense at all. But at the same time, I think it was a great representation, or at least a beginning representation of what Japanese culture is. My family has a very strong tie to Japan, and
I didn't know that.
yeah, so my father-in-law served his mission there, but then my best friends growing up were Japanese.
Oh, cool.
And so it was something that we appreciated. And it's just nice to see. I mean, I saw some of I'm totally spacing on names right now, but I saw some of the actors that I've seen in more recent films that it's just like, whoa, like I totally forgot he was in this film. And I think it's just fantastic. There's just, I haven't been to Japan. I'm hoping to go. So that's something that it's just, yeah, I highly recommend it. I think it was a great movie, and for when it was made, it's actually decently old now, which is funny. I think it's almost 20 years old. So it's just
funny to think of anything around the turn of the century that being old.
Yeah,
Like we're saying about the temples,
yeah,
but
so like, oh man, 20 years.
Yeah, that's more than half our lives ago.
Yeah, for sure.
Which is another weird thing to say.
It's also absolutely a weird thing to say. Also, it's a fun thing to be thinking about getting that old, but
yeah,
it's all good.
All right, that's why you stay healthy, right? That's what I tell my patients, at least. Like, if you're gonna get old, do it well.
Yeah, I'm gonna do it well.
You did say that Last Samurai is rated R, correct?
It is rated R. So I mean, there's obviously, if you have a sensitivity to that, in my opinion, I think it has a lot more to do with the violence than anything. And so, from my perspective, if you're okay with moving beyond just the labeling to actually look for it in regards to the beauty of the scenery, and there's obviously some crazy stuff in it, but I think it was very interesting to see, especially it was a representation of modernism versus not antiquated culture, but essentially the clash of what someone could say colonization versus what was native. And as someone who's kind of raised in the mixed culture, it was something that I also found significant. So I think it's a good story and it's fun to play, and I highly recommend it.
As far as the rated R, probably I'm guessing if any of our listeners have issues with it being rated R, it would be for the chance of nudity or sexual content. Is it clear of that, or would they have to?
No, there's no sexual content.
Okay, so just the violence.
It's just it's the violence mostly.
Is it gore or just violence? Language?
No language, because I think it's based in 1800s, so there's like not any type of language that we recognize. It would definitely be more of the violence. Yeah, it's in English. Yeah, it's in English. Not Japanese. But no, I think the biggest thing is the gore.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
or violence, I would say.
Okay, so if you're sensitive to violence, you probably won't want to watch it. Just like you wouldn't want to watch Daredevil with Kingpin bashing someone's head in. It's a little bit gross.
Yeah. Yep.
But if the gore doesn't bother you, then it could be a good thing to check out.
Yeah, check it out.
So, like I said, we're going to be talking about the new Digimon movie today. It came out about a month ago. It's called Digimon Adventure 02: The Beginning. We'll probably that's a long title, so we'll probably just refer to it as the movie or that movie or this movie or Digimon movie or some variation of that. Because I don't even know if I don't even know if I'll refer to it as the beginning, because I don't see it as the beginning. That's just the title, but we'll get into why I feel that way in a moment. But let's take just 1 to 2 minutes. I've written plenty about the Digimon on the blog, so anyone, if you've followed any of my work on the blog, you've probably come across some of my Digimon posts. But since Patrick hasn't written on the blog, or you said you may have done once.
I think I may have done once, yeah.
There was you're supposed to write for a Comic-Con,
yeah,
but when we went last year, but some family stuff happened. But your brother wrote that for that con.
He did, yeah, my brother did.
I'll put a link in for that. But yeah, since our listeners definitely don't know you near as well as they might know me, let's like a 1 to 2 minute rundown of your history with Digimon.
Sure. So, like probably many other American kids, my first exposure to Digimon had to do with like the Fox Kids Entertainment stuff that came out on Saturday mornings. That was something that was really interesting. Pokemon or Pocket Monsters. It's funny because I think back, Pocket Monsters came through a friend from my friends who are from Japan, and
Oh,
I
so
did.
you actually knew it as Pocket Monsters.
I knew it first as Pocket Monsters
Wow.
before it was Pokemon, because I had friends who had looked at it, and I think it came out in 90 something.
98 or 97.
Yeah. So it was just something that I
But
was.
to know it as Pocket Monsters,
Yeah.
like I think it's a commonly known fact among Pokemon fans that that's what it stands for.
Yeah.
But to know it as that is,
Yeah, that's what I remember it being first.
Wow.
And then it was like, oh, okay, that's what this is. But then Digimon was something a little bit more fun and interesting, just because it was, for me, obviously it's not, but for me it seemed like uniquely American. And I mean the similarities were there, but I started watching it along with my younger brother, and kind of picked up from there, watched the first 3 seasons. So from the first generation, first generation. Actually, I've watched more than that. So first generation for sure with the original kids, the second generation, and then the Digimon Tamers. I watched some of the Beast Spirits, and then also I'm totally spacing out, but I think it's like the splicing, or like
the fusion
one. That's what
crossword.
I Fusion Crossroad. So I did have a history when I was able to see it, and then obviously with the streaming world, I've been able to kind of rewatch some of it. So it's been an interesting journey, and spanning quite a while, but it was fun to actually be able to pick back up with this movie and reconnect with it.
I'm just kind of annoyed that the 5th season, Data Squad or Savers in the Japanese, I can't find on streaming anywhere. Same with the English dub of Cross Wars, known as Digimon Fusion. Can't find it anywhere. But I think most other Digimon titles are available on one streaming service or another. The first 4 seasons, Adventure 02, Tamers, and Frontier, are all on Hulu. Cross Wars is available with subtitles on Crunchyroll, as well as there's other lesser known series like Ghost Game and Appmon, which is a whole another weird variation of it. They're available on Crunchyroll as well. And then the Adventure Try movies are available on Peacock, I believe. So the only ones, and then there's the Last Evolution Kazuna and this new movie that I don't think are up on streaming anywhere, but that's how it is, I guess.
It'll be there eventually, right?
Yeah, somewhere or other, probably. I mean, I'll be buying it when it comes out. That's fine. I bought The Last Evolution the moment the dub was available on iTunes. So let's go into just a general synopsis of the movie, and I'll try to keep it brief. Yeah, we went to see this movie back in November with our friend Tyler, who I didn't even know I had any friends in Texas that liked Digimon, because previous movies I'd gone to in theaters in Utah with my brothers and with my best friend. But moved to Texas, didn't know I had any Digimon friends, but then whined about it to Patrick and our friend Tyler, and they're like, oh, I'll go with you. So the basis of it is it takes place a couple years after Last Evolution Kazuna. And it's about the kids from the 2nd season. So Davis, Ken, Yoli, Kari, Cody, and TK. They chance upon a kid about their age, maybe a year or 2 older. It's not 100% clear. I could probably do the math and figure it out, but that's for another time. He claims to be the first child to have a Digimon partner after this giant Digi-Egg has appeared in the sky over Tokyo. His name's Louis, and he says his partner was Ukamon, and his partner's gone now. But it turns out I had guessed at first that it was because of the same reasons that the original older kids, Matt, Ty, and the others, lost their partners in Last Evolution. But no, he claims to have killed his partner basically. So over the course of the movie, we get different flashbacks to Louis and Ukamon, and Louis claims that it was his wish and Ukamon's power that gave the humans the ability or the opportunity to connect with the Digimon, basically implying that the events of the whole Digimon adventure saga was as a result of his wish, which we'll get into in a moment on why that could potentially be problematic.
Mhm.
But by the end of the movie, reborn giant Ukamon is trying to give Digimon partners to each of the 7 billion people in the world. The world is already concerned about overpopulation, and then you add a digital monster for each of them. Could be adds a whole other meaning to overpopulation. And I have to watch the movie again to understand the ending a bit better, but Louis is basically able to undo his wish, and all the Digivices disappear, but the Digimon partners remain. So that's where it gets a little murky for me on how I take the story. But anything I missed, we'll go into the flashbacks a little bit more in a moment because it gets to a bit of a darker tone. I want to address that separately.
All right. No, I mean, most of it is, and we'll talk a little bit about how the focus is a little bit less on the Digidestined as we know them, and then their relationships, not only with their partners, but also the experience that they have together, and the refocus on Louis and Ukamon, because it was definitely a different feel, a different tone. I would say even a very complex, where I've always enjoyed Digimon as something that's a little bit more straightforward and enjoyable versus something that I have to really think about. This one took it to a different level of,
oh my gosh, this
what
made me feel.
like, what are you trying to convey as a story, and how is that like, what kind of journey are we taking on? But it was definitely a lot more emotional, but all the highlights I think you hit already.
Yeah. So first off, before we get into any other discussion, straight up trigger warning for people that it's a darker tone for this movie, and there are themes of abuse, physical and emotional, to say the least, as well as just more gore than I'm used to in Digimon 2. Like, the Digimon usually just dissolve into the air and the humans maybe have a scratch on them, but that is not the case on this movie. Before I learned that Patrick was into Digimon, I had half thought of, well, maybe I'll take my daughter. She's watched Digimon with me at home before, even some of the later movies. But I quickly shot that idea down because the movie was at 7 o'clock. 7 o'clock's her bedtime. And oh my gosh, I'm glad I didn't take her.
Yeah, I would definitely say that there were some surprising moments from, again, having a little bit, maybe not as like the diehard fans, but there was a lot of nostalgia being brought into the movie that I would say was a little bit more shattered than I would say enhanced through this film. And I think there were definitely some creative liberties taken, maybe not in the actual restore, like retelling of some of like their origins, but essentially just the way that the interactions between a human and a Digimon kind of were portrayed with Louis and Okamon. I mean, going straight to darker tones. I mean, you start off not too early, luckily, but with just a parental child abuse, and I mean
his dad was dying, and his mom, I think he wet himself, and then she threw him onto the balcony in the middle of the winter,
right? So
to miss dinner and think about what he'd done,
right? So there's definitely some mental health challenges happening,
to say the least,
for her, and then obviously some trauma because of Louis' dad being very ill. I mean, basically it seemed like he was comatose. So I think that there was definitely some emotional strain on that family, but the fact that, one, there's also some definite demonstrations of neglect, because Louis had to have been like, what, he was like 5,
something
6?
like that. I'd say maybe 5 or 6 at the oldest.
He was little.
So I think the subtitles, or not the subtitles, the captions put those flashbacks at like 1996.
Right.
So, I mean, that's before, if I'm remembering correctly, that's before the giant Greymon appeared to Kari and Tai.
Mhm.
That's before any of the season 1 stuff easily.
Mhm.
So, I mean, and he's like the same age as those kids, so it's way, way, way back, little kid. Like,
Right.
not even much older than, I mean, you've got a 4-year-old, I've got an almost 4-year-old. It's not much older than they are.
Right. Yeah.
And to see them wetting themselves, which the previous abuse was evident there, if he's to the point of wetting himself,
Right.
and just how ambivalent his mother's emotions were, going from sweet and caring to you need to stay on the balcony and be punished.
Right. Yeah. It was definitely some serious demonstrations of child abuse. I mean, it was so many things. There's child abuse, neglect, definitely emotional imbalance, severe sadness. So there's just a lot that was going on very early in the film.
Yeah.
And then that sets the tone for everything else. I mean, and then there's
the rest
other
of the flashbacks just kind of explore that more and more.
exactly. I mean, from Gasland, I mean, there's so much that I just wasn't expecting. So
this is not a movie to be watching with your kids until they're old enough to understand at least the basics of mental health.
Right.
At least the basics.
Right.
I will not be watching this around my daughter when I buy it. I'll watch all the rest of the Digimon movies, including, you know, some of the dubs for Last Evolution and Adventure Try. They have some not harsh language, but some biblical type swearing. And I would watch those around her. I will not watch this movie around her.
Not for the language.
Yeah, not for the language. That's the least of my concerns with this movie for her. So need a certain amount of emotional maturity for this. One last thing I wanted to kind of address on that one is just there's the family dynamic there, but then even once Ukamon appears and Louis makes a wish that he wants, you know, he wants friends, he wants other people to connect with the Digimon too. And Ukamon just being, I think, just innocent in nature, not understanding human emotions and the human psyche, just went through all the flashbacks, just trying to grant every wish that Louis had, whether it was making his mom kind, and waking his dad up and making him healthy, which essentially turned both parents into zombies.
Mm-hmm.
And then the implications that, like, you know, kids from his class were more or less forced to be his friends. And then in the sidelines, like there were, you know, some clips of I know there was on the TV screen, and one flashback was the battle between Omnimon, Imperial Dramon, and Armageddon from Revenge of Diaboromon, which is I've never been released on DVD or Blu-ray, but it was when Disney had the rights for Digimon, they dubbed it. It takes place after season 2. I don't know if you've ever watched that.
I've watched that, yeah.
But I mean, so we see some of the implications of the other Digidestin in the background. But yeah, it's so because of all these other, I don't remember how it all came about in the end, but Louis kind of realized how awful his wishes were turning out with Ukamon, and I don't remember what happened first, if he was a glass that got in his eye, and
yeah, it was some, I can't remember if it was some type of sharp object that basically blinded him
in one eye, and Ukamon literally pulls out his own eye and gives it to Louis. So yikes.
Yeah, that
and
was
then he
definitely
smashes his Digivice to break his connection with Ukamon. And
then basically Ukamon dies.
Yeah.
Like, at least visually.
Yeah, until the present day when he returns in giant form. It's this whole thing. I don't even know if I could completely articulate all of how it goes down.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of pieces that
like I could give a play-by-play of this movie, and I think it still wouldn't.
Yeah, it wouldn't make sense. Like, you'd have to really watch it and still try and piece it together. And I think that
at least emotionally, you need to see it to understand.
Yeah, to understand what we're talking about, because it was just like, whoa, this is something about. I mean, I think your point about innocence is It's absolutely important because both Louis and Ukumon were so innocent and young. One was a child that had been neglected, and the other
It's a freshly
was a
hatched
freshly
Digimon.
hatched Digiegg that had no understanding of what human emotions were, but then also apparently had some tie to, I think they called it the Digimon sovereign or deity or something.
We'll get to that
And
in a
then,
second with
yeah,
how Ukumon fits into the
yeah,
greater Digimon
Digimon
timeline,
timeline.
because I have questions about that I'm
Yeah,
gonna need to rewatch it and have resolved at some point.
yeah, because there were some pieces where it's just like, oh,
It made me
okay,
question some of the previous canon, but
yeah,
we'll get to that in a moment.
yeah. So then, I mean, from that perspective of having basically another child who has no understanding with an ultimate ability to make anything
Yeah.
happen, that's a recipe for disaster. And so, I mean, obviously,
Yeah.
you see the results in the movie, in
It's
both
like
a good and a bad way.
It's like the living embodiment of be careful what you wish for.
Yeah, absolutely. And not in a bad way. There wasn't meant to be that way at all. It just happened that way because
He didn't know any better.
Yeah, didn't know better.
I mean, he's a perpetual toddler. Like, imagine our kids, if they got everything they wanted.
Right.
My daughter would perpetually be watching Bebe Finn on Netflix. Me and my wife already go insane with that show when we use it as the last resort to get her to sit down. But
Right.
and stuff like that. Like, no, you can't wear this. You're gonna freeze. No, you can't.
Right.
Any parent, especially of a current toddler, will very much relate to this, I'm sure.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
But that was basically Ukumon and Louis at the beginning.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, the movie focuses more on Louis and his relationship with Ukumon than it does with the original, well, not original, the season 2 Digidestin kids.
Right.
They're they find him and he tells them his story of his history with Ukumon, which we see in flashbacks. And
like a literal time travel, it seems like, too.
yeah, there was one scene where well, a couple scenes, I guess, at the beginning and at the end, where I don't know how literally to take it as time travel, but we definitely see Louis, Ken, Davis, and their partners living through that first day when right before and when Louis meets Ukumon for the first time.
Right.
I'm a little unclear as to whether that was actual time travel.
More just like a visual manifestation.
Yeah. The second instance of the time travel kind of makes it seem like it might have literally been time travel because he undoes the wish.
Yeah.
But I mean, that could be almost like psychotherapy work.
Right. Yeah. Might be a little bit
like another vision that kind of
more metaphorical than real.
He takes his wish back instead of literally going back in time. But yeah, I've seen some complaints that like because this movie was so focused on Louis instead of the season 2 kids that it lost some of its impact with fans. Whereas it's like with the Adventure Try movies, there was so much focus on Mako. I don't know, did you see those?
I did see. I haven't seen all.
There's 6 of them.
Yeah, there's 6 of them. I've only seen a few of them.
There was so much emphasis on Mako in those, which I disagree. I think she was definitely a focus, but she wasn't the main focus. There's still plenty of development for the other 8, for all 8 kids. But this movie definitely focused mostly on Louis, not really developing the 6 kids we already knew. But I was okay with that. I mean, we've spent, for TK and Kari at least, we spent 2 seasons and 1 season for the rest of the kids. And then TK and Kari also had all the Try movies, and they were major players to some extent in the Last Evolution movie. Like, there's only so much you can develop these characters before it becomes repetitive.
Right.
So using them as a device to develop a new character almost makes sense to me. Like, you have to introduce new blood to make it to make a new story.
Right.
And if we want Digimon to keep making new stories, they have to have new characters.
Yeah.
Or new conflicts, or otherwise they just keep digivolving perpetually.
Right.
Which some seasons it seems like they did. Like, there's always new forms and new power-ups, and it can only go so far.
It can only go so far. And I think I would have enjoyed it a little bit more if they had explored I mean, there's so many options from the other movies that they
Yeah.
could have done, like to drive into a new character completely. I think that threw me off a little bit
Yeah,
because I thought they would explore like expanded network that they showed even in the second season of individuals from the different
Right.
countries.
or even the Dark Ocean. We never got
Right.
resolution to the big Digimon in the Dark Ocean
Right.
because of writers'
Was it
conflicts or
was it
whatever in the
Rice one?
second
Yeah.
season. Dragomon, I think is who it was, in the Dark Ocean. We never heard anything
Yeah,
again.
and so there's a lot of
There's
source
so
material
many
for them
loose
to
ends that they
expand.
could have pulled
Yeah.
that to expand on, but they chose a new character.
But I mean, I don't know if it was a little bit more artistry because again, this
Yeah.
focused on different tropes that I think other of the films or animation had played on. So maybe that's the direction they want to go, and that's really fine.
Yeah.
It's just it was definitely a direction I did not expect, and but lends itself to an interesting story. I wouldn't say it was like a horrible story. It was just different.
Yeah, definitely different. I mean, the only other thing is like there was because the focus was so much on Louis' backstory and not
Mhm.
on the other kids, there were minimal fight scenes.
Right? Yeah.
There was a little bit of more rescuing Louis at the beginning where, you know, they digivolved into Pyldramon to save him. And then at the end, fighting the big Ukamon, we got basically all the champion Digimon. We got Angelamon was the only ultimate I think that we properly
Yeah, for a
saw.
period,
Then
yeah.
all of the DNA digivolving. So we got to see like all the, other than the armor digivolving, we got to see all the forms that the Digimon had taken in season 2, fighting the big Ukamon. But even that wasn't the big battle. That was more of a distraction so that Louis could make amends with Ukamon.
Yeah.
But they knew they weren't going to beat this giant thing.
Yeah, it wasn't. It definitely
The
wasn't.
battle wasn't the focus.
Yeah, absolutely.
In some ways, that was more fan service to show all the different forms,
Yeah.
which I'm okay with. I'm okay with a little fan service.
Hmm.
Anything more on that?
No.
Okay. Yeah, like I said before, one of the big issues I have is how this all fits into the Digimon timeline. You mentioned the Digimon Sovereign. If you remember Azulongmon, do
Exactly.
you remember the Digimon Sovereign?
I do. There were 4.
Yeah, they were all 4 appeared in Digimon
Yeah,
Tamers.
the Digimon Tamers.
But we also saw Azulongmon in season 2. It's a whole big info dump backstory flashback episode when
Right.
Azulongmon appeared in season 2.
Right.
Pretty much explaining the whole history of the Digidestined and how they came into being. And what but between that and things that Jedi had said in season 1 and a flashback that we saw in the Tri movies with the original 5 Digidestined from before season 1, 2 of which we met in the Tri movies. It just doesn't all seem to mesh up very well.
Right. Yeah. Kind of
Between
branched.
like the sovereign / an essence known as homeostasis kind of chose the Digidestined. But then in this movie, we're led to believe that it was Louis' wish that created all of that. And I've taken some of that. I posed this question on Reddit and on a couple Digimon Facebook groups, and the kind of general consensus is Louis an unreliable narrator, as a writing what's like a writing technique that your narrator,
Right.
the storyteller here is not completely reliable.
Right.
He doesn't have all the information. He's not omniscient.
No, yeah, he's just like a perspective one. So yeah.
So I honestly took it a lot that way up until the Digivices disappeared in the last scene.
Right.
I was thinking, okay, well, Louis doesn't know everything.
Right.
But then when the Digivices disappeared, I'm like, wait, how does this fit?
Right.
Because I mean, we weren't given the years that the original 5 Digidestined saved the digital world before season 1, but based on where I would at least guess their ages to be in Tri, I would have thought that they were in the digital world having those adventures with their Digivices. I confirmed that they had Digivices as well. That was a question too. Before Louis' wish was my guess. So either I've got the timeline wrong, which is a distinct possibility. There's no actual ages were given, or there's something amiss. with how Louis and Ukamon fit into the canon of Digimon Adventure. So I don't know if you've put too much thought into that, but it was
Yeah,
the whole complex relationship between the Sovereign, Homeostasis, Ukamon, and
yeah.
the different generations of Digidestined, I guess.
No, I think I didn't. I think when I was rethinking about this, I think the biggest thing was like, okay, how do these, like, again, these I don't know, controlling powers
Mhm.
play into it with Dukumon, especially because his ability to kind of change reality, which wasn't as, I mean, from what I've experienced from Digimon, wasn't as prominent. They had power and ability in their world, but not in ours. So that was interesting. I think, but the ending threw me off. I think with the Digimon or the Digivices going away, then I was just like, so, but even other films where they've had like different connections as adults, because they're still technically kids in this one from the second generation. But I mean, they
I
have,
mean, they're young adults.
yeah,
They're in college.
but they're like, there's been demonstration, I think, or at least storytelling of them being a future where it's like, so I'm a little confused as to how and where this played into. But
Yeah, because the ending of season 2, I think is what you're talking
Yeah.
about. There's an epilogue with like 20 years later or something with
Right.
them as parents. And there was actually a line about everyone on Earth having their own Digimon partner, which again, 7 billion people, 7 billion Digimon partners. I'm not sure how that. So that's where my brain first went to when Ukamon was trying to give everyone a partner. But
that didn't happen. So then it's like,
yeah, but also it's kind of still in the process of happening, perhaps. But
maybe.
however that all works, or maybe that was a dubbing issue. Maybe it was more of a hyperbole.
Yeah, that's true.
There's so many ways you could take that, because we still have years in between this movie and the epilogue.
Right.
Because we also have the return of the Digimon partners that disappeared, like Agumon and Gabumon, because they disappeared at the end of Last Evolution, but they're back.
Right.
So we don't know how that plays in too, which is what I had been hoping for. I was hoping for some resolution to that.
Yeah, of course.
But yeah, reconciling the canon was a bit wasn't sure how to go about that.
Yeah, we'll see what they try and do.
Or if they do more, because Last Evolution was supposed to be the last movie.
That's true.
But now we've got a movie called The Beginning that is the last movie. So
who knows?
Is that poetic, or is that hinting at more stories, or
right?
I don't know.
I wouldn't mind more stories.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah, it's just more of what direction.
Yeah. I mean, at this point, we have no Digivices, but we still have the bonds, and it's been said multiple times throughout the story that it's the bond that made the Digimon grow and Digivolve and everything. The Digivices were just a tool,
right? Which
I thought was more. I mean, it had been explicitly said before, but I think it was just reinforced in this one, because there was the whole worry of, if we defeat Ukamon, will our partnerships disappear? Right. And that was kind of where I was left with at the end, is that, I have my issues, I have my questions about the canon and everything, but when it all came down to it, even though the Digivices disappeared, they were all, and they didn't know what would happen, but they were all reassured that, like, we've been through enough as partners that our bond will still be here. Right. Doesn't matter where it came from, whether it was Ukamon, whether it was homeostasis, whether it was fate or by choice, like, we have our bonds now, and that's what matters. Right. So I kind of came away with the super cheesy thought of, how our bonds start doesn't matter, but what matters is our bonds. Right. So absolutely, the connection that you make, I think that was a interesting theme in the story, because even Louis and Ukamon's relationship, it was very one way. It was very one way, but at the same time, if you look, it was very immature, not in a negative way. It's just, it was two kids, one again with an incredible amount of power, one with a incredible amount of trauma, supporting and serving each other in a sense of filling each other's needs. And at the same time, as you move through the film at the end, which I honestly think that there wasn't enough of that, of how the needs were met.
between the two, but essentially at the end you get them to reconcile and still realize that the bond was always there no matter what, or it's still strong. Because if it wasn't, then there wouldn't have been able to be a resolution with Ukamon and Louis. But there was, and forgiveness. And I think that was definitely something that makes a lot of sense from a bond perspective, and that the stronger the bond, like even because Louis breaks his device, so essentially he willingly destroyed a relationship with this connection with his Digimon that the others were trying to save, which is funny.
Willingly and forcefully broken.
Yes, very forcefully, and
it was a hammer, bat, and everything.
That was a lot of things, but
and he was like trying to convince the other kids in the present day, like, no, this is bad. You don't want to be connected to your partners. The Digimon and humans are not meant to connect.
Yeah, so there's definitely I feel some resolution in reality that the bonds are stronger than even the devices themselves, and that the bonds between partners are always essential and can grow. Yeah,
I mean, even if we look back at when Tai and Kari were little with the first Digi-Egg, Greymon, like they helped Agumon to Digivolve to fight Parrotmon long before they were Digidestined. But it was the bond that, I mean, he'd only been with them for like a day, and they bonded with him enough as kids to be able to make him strong enough to protect them.
Right.
So I think that says something maybe about how kids bond.
Yeah, maybe.
My daughter will come home from preschool and she's got a new best friend every day.
Right.
You know, but also it's just, the power that we have as humans, I guess, too, to like bond with people, and regardless of what brings us together.
Right.
So, overall, did you like it?
That's the question, isn't it? So I would say I don't know if I could say that I liked it in my nostalgic sense, because that's what I was expecting. It was just coming out of having, I think I had just rewatched. I didn't rewatch the entire thing, but I had just watched Tamers. I really like Tamers, and there's something really funny about it.
I have a whole bunch more thoughts on Tamers that we can discuss another time. It's great.
Yeah, so I think there was that expectation. I love the second generation kids. I think that their dynamics are hilarious. But I think even more so than the first generation of Digidestineds. But I didn't get that in this film. I wanted to see more of what their lives were about. But because the focus was on Louis, and then just the surprise of how much damage he had gone through in his life, I didn't love it. Now I think it was well done.
Yeah.
I think that there was great visuals. And you know what's really funny? I'm gonna say this. I was gonna ask you this part. I don't know if we'll have enough time to do that. But I am so used to subbed versions that it actually threw me off when they were speaking English.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because my brother has gotten me into just everything original. Voices, and then just the subtitles, that I was just like, I don't know why, it was just different. And then it was just like, okay, for some reason I was just expecting something else, but and like I said, I think it's just a preference now, because of my experience, but it was surprising. But I mean, but I liked a lot of portions of it. I just felt like it left me with a lot of questions, versus feeling like some type of fulfillment, and like, okay, the story was resolved in a sense of everything makes sense. I feel like it ended with like, so where are we now? Like, I'm not really sure from there.
And I think part of that was the beginning, the poetic title, that it's the ending, but it's the beginning. So where do we go from here? Wherever we want. But I agree, like artistically, both from a writing perspective and visually, it was beautiful. It was a captivating story. It was definitely different with how much they focused on Louis instead of the other kids. But it definitely, I think one of my issues with it, aside from potential canon issues, is I felt like this movie was like we were told that this movie was supposed to be like a sequel or a follow-up to Last Evolution, when the older Digidestined lost their partners because they'd grown up too much. But it was, so I felt like I was expecting some resolution to that as well. That like, okay, how do they get their partners back? They have it in the season. They have them in the season 2 epilogue. So what happens? And maybe, so, and even in there's like a very brief post-credit scene. Thank you, Marvel, for training us to sit through the credits of every movie now. And I was expecting, oh, well, maybe Agumon and Gabumon will reappear, and that'll be our post-credit scene. But no, when the post-credit scene was like, it was like Louis' Digi-Egg hatching or something.
Right.
So it was even that, I'm like, there wasn't any resolution to that issue. So yes, it was a follow-up. Yes, it kind of played in, it was same kind of animation, same kind of style. They even have the same smartphone Digivice connections as the movie before.
Right.
But it still didn't resolve anything from the movie before. So if it was meant to be a sequel or a follow-up to the last movie, I don't see how. As 2 separate movies, perfectly fine. You know,
yeah, I can see them standalone.
But they were different tone, they were different themes, different stories. You know, one was about, you know, careful what you wish for and about the bonds we make with people, and the other one was about what it means to grow up.
Right.
So very, very different. So, and I think that's what it is it goes into what we were expecting. You know, you expected some nostalgia, I expected closure.
Yeah.
And neither of us got closure. So will they do more Digimon? I haven't seen anything announced for follow-up to this one. I hesitate to even call anything coming after this a sequel because
I have no idea if it's going to be that way.
Well, and just like Last Evolution was not a sequel to Try because it was a different focus, a different a different theme. This one I don't feel like was a sequel to Last Evolution, at least not in a follow up the story and, you know, resolve anything left over. They're all, I feel like there's something different between a sequel and a movie that happens to be a follow up.
Right.
The next thing in the timeline doesn't necessarily make it a sequel.
Right.
But so we'll see. I haven't seen anything announced yet, but like I said, Last Evolution was supposed to be the last movie, and in my opinion, even though that came out during COVID and things were it could have really tanked for the movie. Fans have been vocal enough, or fans have had enough influence, I think, that another movie was made and more was created. So if there's enough demand for it, I think we could have another movie.
Yeah.
But I guess time will tell.
Time will tell, and hopefully it provides a little bit more connection, and that's what I would love to see again. And but I think it did make me want to go back and rewatch some of the original stuff, but then also expand into the greater content that's been created about it. Because I as I said, I haven't seen all of the different movies, especially the Try movies, and then.
I mean, I've already restarted season 1.
See all of it again.
The
So there's a lot more to catch up on, try and dig deeper into things I may have missed that the more avid fan may know. And so that's something that's something I'm looking forward to.
Well, and I think I've said before that, I mean, Digimon was made for kids and we enjoyed it as kids, but I think it's one of those kids animes that has aged well, because there are themes that go beyond, like that went over my head as a kid. I mean, we have, and I can provide links to some of those here with I mean, Brad did a blog post several years ago about friendship and Matt's depression at the end of season 1 and his quest of friendship. I did a post a couple of years ago about Digimon Tamers and exploring just the power of grief and emotion that comes in the second half of that series. But there's more and more that, like, you know, I watch this show over and over and I get more and more. And I think that's the hallmark of a good kids show is you can keep enjoying it as an adult.
Absolutely.
I don't know if I would have gotten into it as an adult. That's a different story. But I mean, having loved it as a kid, there's more to love as an adult now.
Right.
So that's all we've got for today. Thanks for joining us, and let us know if you saw the movie back in November, if you had any thoughts, and if you can answer this timeline canon question for me, you'll be my favorite person for the day. And we'll catch you next time.
Thanks for listening to the Latter-day Saint Geeks podcast. We're members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, but we don't represent the church in any official capacity. Remember to subscribe to the podcast. You can see our show notes and blog posts on latterdaysaintgeeks.com, and you can follow us on Facebook and Instagram at Latter-day Saint Geeks. Music was provided courtesy of David Schradel.